This is a Reshad of Supernatural with From Genesis to Revelation, and today is day 141. And we are in the prophetic book of Daniel today. And our reading today was Daniel chapters 1 through 6. I'm going to open it with prayer and then we're going to go straight into the Word of God. Heavenly Father, I just come before you today in the name of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, giving you all the praise, the honor, and the glory for an awesome day. Father God, in the name of Jesus, I just ask that you would bless each and every one of us today to uh, hear from you today in your word. Father, I just give you all the praise, the honor, and the glory, and I thank you for allowing us to share your word with as many as we can, as far as we can. Father, we ask in the name of Jesus that you would block every distraction that attempts to steal our focus from you. And we thank you for the spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of you. Help us, Father God, to understand your word and how to apply it to our daily lives. We give you all the praise, the honor, and the glory in Jesus' holy name. Amen. Amen. So, today in Daniel chapters 1 through 6, we actually see this is where Daniel um, um, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were actually taken to taken to Babylon. Excuse me. And it starts off by pretty much talking about Daniel's life, how they were taken captive and they were to go, they were chosen to serve at the king. And so they had 3 years of training, and Daniel, they were apportioned a wine and certain delicacies from the king, and Daniel didn't want to defile himself. He asked if he could have vegetables and water, and so the guard, of course, didn't really want to do that because he didn't want the king to destroy him. However, Daniel asked if he could have 10 days, just, vegetables and water so he could see the difference. And of course, after that, he saw that they were much more healthier. And so after that, all the people that were in training started eating vegetables and water. Um, so, of course, after 3 years, they all went before the king, and this was Nebuchadnezzar, and he had renamed Daniel to um, Belshazzar, I believe. Um, the king had actually renamed all of them. He had renamed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Their original names were Hananiah, um, Azariah, and Mishael. But then the commander of the officials assigned new names to them, and to Daniel he assigned the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. And so these were young. They were young. During the study, they were probably about maybe in their teens, early teens when this all happened. And so they were really young, but they knew the Lord. They knew the Lord enough to know what was right and what was wrong. And the purpose of this, of them going through the training, was to help them they tried to kind of brainwash them so that they would know the things of Babylon, the things of their heritage, and to forget about what they had learned from being a child of God in Israel. However, of course, we all know that didn't work. And so, going on into the next chapter, it talks about the king's dream, his very first dream, and this was the king of Nebuchadnezzar. And of course, he went and he had called all the magicians, the astrologer, and the soothsayers, and he wanted them to tell him the dream. And all of them and the magicians, none of them could tell him the dream because it wasn't for them to tell. And he started killing everybody, all the wise men. And so, of course, Daniel asked one of the guards, why has the king handed down such a decree to have all the wise men killed? And the king told him, and he asked if he could go before the king, and he went and prayed, and he asked, of course, his Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to pray with him that the Lord will have mercy and reveal to him the dream. And of course, the Lord did. And so he was able to go to the king and tell him what his dream meant. And so after that, the king promoted him. And of course, you guys know the people of Babylon really didn't like that. And and pretty much told him what was getting ready to happen. That the Lord had pretty much given him a vision as to what would happen after he was king, after his reign of being king was over. And so anyway, going into um, chapter 3, it talks about being the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being casted into the fiery furnace because Nebuchadnezzar had made this gold image, and they done it just he made this gold image, and he set it up so that the people, every time they heard music, would fall down and worship it. And of course, if you serve God, you're not gonna worship any other God. You're not gonna fall down and serve any image, especially not one of gold and made with hands. And so, of course, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't do it, and the Chaldeans had went to the king and let them know that the Jews, or of course Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, did not worship the image. And so, of course, the king told them what, if they were all brought to the king, and he said, you can, if you if I play the music and you bow down, you don't have to worry about anything. But if you don't bow down, then you will be casted into the fiery furnace. And of course, they told him, hey, you know what? You can throw us in the fire, but and our God will deliver us. We're not going to serve you. We're not going to serve this image because of the God that's in heaven. And of course, after that, um, Nebuchadnezzar was very upset, and so he had the furnace heated 7 times hotter than what it normally was. In fact, the men that heated the fire and that were going to take Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego down there, they actually perished. And so once they got thrown in the fiery furnace, and they were thrown in there with everything on, their trousers, their turbans, um, all their clothes, they were burned, they were thrown in the fire. And Nebuchadnezzar looked down there and asked one of the guards, hey, did we not throw 3 men in there? Why is it that there's 4 men running around in there, and one looks like the son of the son of God? And of course, we know that was the angel of the Lord helping them, coming to their defense. And so, of course, Nebuchadnezzar had them brought out, and they were brought out without the smell of smoke. None of their beards were burned, nothing was burned on them. And that's what God will do for us. Anytime God deliver us out of a mess, He will make it to where we do not have the smell of smoke coming from what we just went through. And that's the same thing He did for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When you stand up for God and you make your accusers know that you serve God, it doesn't matter what they do to you, God will deliver you. I'm telling you, God will deliver you. If you confess Him before men, He will confess you. Jesus Christ will confess you before His Father. And so that's what pretty much happened in chapter 3. And going on to chapter 4, it talks about another dream that Nebuchadnezzar had that Daniel interpreted, and it pretty much told him that he would have his kingdom taken away from him until 7 times have passed over, until he knew that God was the God of all gods. And of course, Daniel went and told him, what was going on, and it happened 12 months after Daniel told him the prophecy of the meaning of the dream, that he was walking through his castle and he was talking about all the stuff that he did. I did this, and this was my kingdom, and I built it. And right when the words were coming out of the mouth, judgment was pronounced upon him, and he was given a heart of a beast, and he was meant to go and eat. He ate with the donkeys, and he stayed there. It was like they said that his hair grew like eagle's feathers, his nails grew like claws, and eventually he realized that God was God, and that there was no one else who could do what he did, and he didn't do anything. It was all God. And so, of course, once he realized that, his kingdom was returned and restored back to him. And after that, his son, who took his son had, um, who had took reign after him, went and grabbed the holy vessels that the Chaldeans had took from the temple that was in Judah, and they drank out of them. Him, his wives, his concubines, and all his friends. They drank out of all of the holy cups that belonged to God. And so, of course, there was a hand that appeared with a writing on the wall, and it had many tekel and the interpretation of it meaning God has numbered your kingdom and put it into it. Tikal, you have been weighed on the scales and found deficient. Perez, your kingdom has been divided and given over to the Medes and the Persians. And then that same night he died. The same night it says, then Belshazzar gave orders, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a necklace of gold around his neck and issued a proclamation concerning him that he now had authority as the third ruler in the kingdom. Then that same night, Belshazzar the Chaldean king was slain. So Darius the Medes received the kingdom at about the age of 62. And again, after that, another king, of course, was in which Darius and King David served him as well. And chapter 6 talks about Daniel being thrown into the lion's den because, of course, there was jealousy there because Daniel was a Jew, and he was elevated. You know, he was one of the governors that Darius had appointed over the land of Babylon. And so they knew that the only way that they could get him was something on the law because they found him faithful. You know, it says that Daniel distinguished himself. This was 6 and 3. It says, then this Daniel began distinguishing himself among the commissioners and satraps because he possessed an excellent, well, the Bible that I'm reading says an extraordinary spirit. And the king planned to appoint him over the entire kingdom. And so, because Daniel was distinguished himself before everyone and had an excellent spirit within him, the king was going to promote him to being ruler over the kingdom. And so the people all plotted against Daniel, went to the king and made him make this crazy decree that if anyone did not worship his God over the next 30 days, that they would be placed into the lion's den. And so that, of course, once the decree went out, Daniel opened his window and he prayed that day 3 times to God so that everyone could see him. You know, and I love that because that showed that his boldness and his trust in God and his faithfulness in God, that he wasn't going to let anyone tell him who he could worship, when he can worship, and where he was going to worship. And so, of course, once they saw Daniel worshiping God that 3 times that day, they went and told the king, and they told him, you know, didn't you tell us that we couldn't worship any other gods but your gods for 30 days? Well, this Daniel was worshiping another God, and of course, he brought him to him and he put him in the lion's den overnight. And the King Darius, they was troubled in his spirit because he knew Daniel was faithful. He knew Daniel didn't do anything wrong. However, because he made the decree, the king could not take back his decree. And that's mostly what we see in the Bible. Anytime a king made a decree or went out or pressed something with his signet ring, he could not take that decree back. He had to follow through with it. And so, of course, the king could not sleep overnight because of Daniel being in the den. And the next day, early in the morning, he went to the den and he called for Daniel and he asked if his God was able to save him. And of course, Daniel told him yes. Um, what he says is, then Darius king. Um, it says, when he had come near the den to Daniel, he cried out with a troubled voice. This is 6 and 20. The king spoke and said to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you constantly serve, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel spoke to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth, and they have not harmed me, inasmuch as I was found innocent before him, and also toward you. O king, I have committed no crime. Then the king was very pleased and gave orders for Daniel to be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatsoever was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. And so when we trust in God, He's able to deliver us out of every trouble that we're in. And I believe that really is what the first part of the book of Daniel is about, is learning to trust in God, is learning to really stand and believe that God is able. You know, when you have that unwavering faith that God is able to deliver you, there is no devil in hell that can keep you from serving God. And that's what we see in the book of Daniel with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as well as with Daniel. And the more that you honor God, the more He'll honor you. God promoted him. You know, God gave him the ability to see visions and dreams and interpretations. And He gave him the ability to be promoted to governor and to ruler and to all those different offices that he held. It says in my study Bible that Daniel served all the kings for over 70 years. He served continuously through every king that Babylon had over 70 years. That's how long he served them. And so at the end of this, Darius made a decree to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language who were living in all the land. and it says, may your peace abound. I make a decree that in all the dominion of my kingdom men are to fear and tremble before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and enduring forever. And his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed, and his dominion will be forever. He delivers and rescues and performs signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has also delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel enjoyed success in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. And so that's all I have for you guys today. I just encourage you guys to put your trust completely in God. You know, it doesn't matter how old or how young you are, God will deliver you as long as you truly trust in Him. If you are not saved, please make Jesus Christ your Lord and Savior. Believe that He was raised from the dead and He is sitting at His right hand right now in the heavenlies waiting for you. If you are saved, let the light of your testimony be a lamp of God for those lost in darkness, because there is someone who's waiting for you. Um, and I just thank you, Father. I thank you, Lord, for allowing us to have an excellent spirit in us. Teach us, Father God, how to distinguish ourselves above men so that you will get the glory through us. Father, I thank you for supernatural living. I thank you for this special one that's watching this video, Father. If they are not saved, I thank you, Lord, that they have made the choice to give their lives over to you today, Father. I give you all the praise, the honor, and the glory in Jesus' mighty name.